The Ghent Altarpiece is an enormous, highly complex and extraordinarily vivid work of art made to go behind the high altar of a cathedral in what we now call Belgium, in the town of Ghent, as a focal point for the gathering of the Christians in that town as they came together to celebrate the Mass or the Eucharist, in which Christ became present in their midst. If you think of the Eucharist as a drama, which it is in lots of ways, this is the set. And both materially as an object and in terms of its subject matter, it's something that unfolds itself to us. It depicts, indeed it is, an apocalypse in the literal sense of an unveiling. That's what apocalypse means. Our earth gathering, being gathered into heaven around the slain Lamb who is Christ at the heart of that new heavenly reality. We're seeing our earth as it will be as we look into heaven as it already is. Well, the fact that this is a folding altarpiece gives it an added dramatic impact and power, because for much of the year, the wings of the altarpiece would be closed. And then on feast days, the doors would be open, and it would be a bit like being admitted into heaven itself, into a paradisal scene. This would have been one of the most intense aesthetic experiences you would have in your life. But there's also a very significant connection to the Sermon on the Mount and Jesus' teaching of who the blessed are. Around the altar with the slain lamb on it, we've got the embodiment of the beatitudes in different groups, clearly distinct groups. So to the left, the lower left of the painting, kneeling, are the prophets, and those represent those who mourn. Above them, in the top left, we see a group who are known as the confessors. So they suffer for their faith, they're not actually martyred, and they represent the peacemakers. The top right, we see a group of female saints, some of them martyrs, but not all, and they represent the pure in heart. And then moving down, we see the disciples, plus St. Paul and St. Barnabas, who represent the poor in spirit. And to their right, a standing group who are martyrs and various other ecclesiastical dignitaries, some recognisable figures from the church hierarchy. The merciful are depicted in one of the most surprising ways, perhaps. And unlike some of the other groups, there are two types of people in the group who represent the merciful. They're on the left-hand side, in the left-hand wing. And they're a group of just judges, as they're called, and knights of Christ. These are both representative of quite a high class of society. So these two groups of people together represent the merciful. And I would guess that a 21st century person would find that surprising. If we were imagining who the merciful might be, we might not immediately think of these quite powerful groups, wealthy and powerful groups of people. So we might begin to think, as we try and cross the centuries in our imaginations, that part of what's going on here is a recognition that where there is strength, there needs to be also a tempering of that strength in the service of the good. There's mercy in those two groups, but there's mercy above all in the Lamb at the centre. So we see mercy in the middle and at the top, and I guess too in the two interceding figures who are either side of the Christ/God figure at the top, who are the Virgin Mary and John the Baptist, they're interceding for divine mercy on the whole world. So there's mercy, there's a plea for mercy going on at the top. And then in the outer two wings, we've got the merciful on the left-hand side in that left-hand wing, represented by the just judges and the knights of Christ. And the meek in the right-hand wing, who are represented by hermits and pilgrims. And those two outer wings, the merciful on the left, the meek on the right, are particularly interesting in the way that they balance and mirror each other, because the hermits and the pilgrims are poor, and the judges and the knights are rich, and yet they're both given equal status. And their presence on each side, balancing each other, I think is a really important statement that everyone is to be represented here, and everyone can be a saint. And actually, you can't have the rich on their own in heaven. They will have to be merciful, in fact, to live merciful lives, respecting the condition of those who are poor and in need, if either of group is to really flourish in God's great plan for the world. This painting is a stimulus to exactly that question: who are the merciful? And that's an always fascinating recognition of the limits of our sight. If we painted this altarpiece now, who would we put in it? What would they look like? Who would we associate with which of the beatitudes? And particularly in this case, how would we make mercy appear in the context of the great court of heaven? And who amongst the people we live and work with, who would we point to as those who particularly embody mercy? One of the most powerful aspects of this painting has only recently been rediscovered in the most recent restoration of it, and that is that central lamb. And in the recent renovation, they discovered that the eyes of the lamb had been, at some point in history, painted to look more like realistic sheep's eyes sticking out to the side. And actually, that's not what the artists intended. And what we see now in the newly restored painting is the lamb with almost human eyes, slightly disconcertingly, looking straight at us. And in my view, all great religious paintings have hooks that mean we can't just walk away from this painting. It pulls us back, or it just holds us in position. And for me, above all, that's the hook that this hugely complex altarpiece has, that direct gaze of the lamb that says, "And where do you stand amongst all of these others? Where are you?"